state. House Bill 1. Mr. Secretary, read the bill.
House Bill 1, an act concerning alternative treatment for serious diseases causing chronic pain and debilitating conditions. Third reading of the bill.
Senator Hayne on your bill.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. House Bill 1 is simply put the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Pilot Program Act. This would create a highly regulated, very limited 4-year medical cannabis pilot program, after which it sunsets. Patients with specified debilitating conditions and a Department of Public Health issued registry identification card could possess a limited amount of cannabis for their medical use. Patients could designate someone to pick up their medicine, but all of these patients' caregivers have to meet stringent guidelines. They have to have background checks. The structure has 22 state licensed growers, 1 per state police district, a maximum, could be less. And these will be regulated by the Department of Agriculture, 60 dispensaries around the state, and these will be regulated by Department of Public Health. The state police will have general police supervisory authority over all of it. There's a verification system for the patient, a registration ID card. The act restricts use of marijuana in public, cannot be open in any vehicle in the presence of minors near school grounds. The qualifying conditions are listed in the act. They are physical ailments as determined by a physician who has a bona fide doctor-patient relationship with the patient. That has to be strictly followed. The medical records are submitted along with background information for the use to the Department of Public Health. The physicians who recommend cannabis may not perform any physical examinations over the internet, receive any compensation from caregivers, patients, or medical cannabis businesses, serve on the boards of any cultivation center and dispensary, hold any economic interest in the medical cannabis business. They may not refer patients to a caregiver or dispensary or advertise in a dispensary. The Department of Public Health will refer any physician who violates any of these conditions to the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. There is a provision there for a strict requirement that anyone who possesses the identification card and who drives a motor vehicle must submit to a field sobriety test as authorized by a police officer to determine impairment. And this is admissible for the first time in Illinois law. This would be admissible in a court of law. It's an unprecedented implied consent. This bill is filled with walls to keep this limited. We have learned from California and Colorado and Michigan and other states. There are 18 states and the District of Columbia which have done this. And I have to say, sadly, that most of them have done it sloppily. They've been done by popular referenda, because this is popular in the sense that citizens believe it's a reasonable exercise of the law. Many physicians groups support this, as well as citizen groups. But the states that have implemented it have allowed it to become chaotic, a freewheeling doctor-patient relationship where none exists at all. We have taken steps over the past 2 years to strictly control the distribution of marijuana to those who need it. It is a substance which is on the schedule of controlled substances placed there by Congress in 1937 over the objection, by the way, of the head of the AMA at that time, Dr. Woodward. And he objected because there were known medicinal uses for marijuana at that time and prior years. That act by Congress in 1937 has inhibited research. It's inhibited states from doing what we're doing here today. There's been a change in policy at the national level, and we are confident that a strict, controlled implementation of this for those who suffer pain with the diseases and conditions listed in the Act can be well served. Many of us have anecdotal evidence of the value of this. Doctors' groups have endorsed this, nurses, and much more benign than, for example, powerful prescription drugs such as OxyContin, Vicodin, and the rest. The scourge of these drugs is well known. This is not true of the medical use of marijuana. And I would ask for your consideration and open the floor to any questions.
Senator Bivens, for what purpose do you rise?
Will the sponsor you?
Indicates you will.
Thank you. Senator Dewey, you've mentioned that doctors have said this is okay to use, or in your estimation, is this a safe and effective drug?
Senator Hayne.
It is for the alleviation of pain, yes, sir. It's been considered for decades to have the value of alleviating pain with little side effects. The other powerful drugs have side effects. This is a relatively benign substance compared to those. It doesn't cure anything, obviously, but it does offer relief from pain. Yes, sir.
Senator Bivens.
Are there any studies or any doctors who have actually said that it's a safe and effective drug? I know you've indicated something along that line, but have they actually said that?
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir. There have been 250 doctors or more across Illinois have written in support of this bill. The Nurses Association, the Advanced Practice Nurses, Illinois Dietitian Association, the American College of Physicians, among others. I have a letter from a professor from Washington University's Medical School in St. Louis who's written me in support of the bill. He's a professor of neuropharmacology in neurology, and he recommends this for the use of patients who have painful neuropathy, resulting in disabling pain and numbness. This neuropathic pain is difficult to treat, and his study group has found that the use of marijuana does do well.
Senator Bivens.
Thank you for the answer, Senator. Do you know, will there be any warning labels on the packages that are being distributed?
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir. There's supposed to be warning labels on the packages saying this is for medical use only. And again, I hope I said this at the outset. The one who has permission to use this substance may not have it in anything but a closed container. It may not be used in public. It cannot be in any open form. It must be strictly controlled to their home and used in that home and not in front of any minor.
Chris Slivey of WUIS seeks permission to take pictures. Seeing no objection, permission granted. Senator Bivens.
Thank you, Mr. President. Beyond that warning, is there any warning as to side effects or any other problems with the drug that, as most drugs require?
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir. That'll be done by the Department of Public Health. They'll have signs inside the dispensaries with any that any of these conditions which you suggested, which I don't know of, would be informed to the user. That has to be done. That'll be done by rule. It'll take a year to set this thing up, actually.
Senator Bivens.
Yes, thank you, Senator. I have been told within the bill there's 33 diseases that this covers, and someone suggested to me yesterday it was a proponent lobbying for this, that it's up to 36 now. Do we know the number of diseases and illnesses this would cover?
Senator Hayne.
Senator, I think the confusion is there's 33, is what I understand. But there could be some variations within those diseases that may add a couple more. But that has to be determined again, those variations, I suppose, by the Department of Public Health, working with the doctors community. But as I understand, it's 33.
Senator Bivens.
Would the Department of Public Health have the ability to expand that number beyond?
Senator Hayne.
They could by rule, but it's got to go through JCAR and the rulemaking process, and it's got to be based upon the structure of this bill.
Senator Bivens.
And do we know how many, within these diseases, do we know how many people in the state of Illinois would qualify the number, and what percentage of those people would be using the medical marijuana?
Senator Hayne.
No, I don't have that information, Senator Bivens. I wish I did.
Senator Bivens.
Thank you, Senator, for your answers. To the bill, Mr. President.
To the bill.
I've asked that question of several of the proponents. It's a concern of mine. And I know it's a difficult number to come up with how many people would fit into that, how many would use it. But one of the concerns that occurs to me is as you have businesses coming into our, our state, they're going to have a substantial investment to produce this and distribute this. And if the numbers are so low that they can't maintain a profit, then they're either going to close up shop or we're going to have to expand. So that is a worry and a concern, and something that we do need to think about. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Raoul, for what purpose do you rise?
Question of the sponsor.
Indicates you will yield.
Senator Hayne, is it true that for medical cannabis card holders, if you ingest any amount of cannabis that results in the lack of capacity to drive safely, then you are guilty of a DUI? In other words, if the consumption of any amount of cannabis can act with ordinary care, they are guilty of a DUI?
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir.
Senator Raoul.
Is it also true that under current law, if a person smokes cannabis and drives, a person smells like cannabis, the passenger compartment of a person's car smells like cannabis, a person has a pot pipe in the center console of his or her car with cannabis residue in it, and a person admits to smoking cannabis an hour before driving, that person is not guilty of DUI unless there is further evidence pursuant to the case of People versus McPeak.
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir.
Senator Raoul.
Would it be fair to say that House Bill 1 addresses the current problem outlined in McPeak by allowing the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration standardized field sobriety tests to be admissible in cannabis DUI prosecutions for medical cannabis card holders and everyone else suspected of cannabis DUI?
Senator Hayne.
So, yes, sir, that's absolutely correct.
Senator Raoul.
And does the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration find that the use of standardized field sobriety tests are an effective tool in the detection of cannabis DUI, according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's Instructor Training Manual and its resource guidelines?
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Senator Raoul.
Does House Bill 1 mandate that the suspension of a cannabis card holder's driver's license and the revocation of their medical cannabis card if they...
Senator Hayne.
Yes, for a year.
Senator Raoul.
Does House Bill 1 prohibit medical cannabis card holders from transporting cannabis unless it is in a closed, sealed container that does not emit the odor of cannabis?
Senator Hayne.
That's an absolute requirement under the law, under this proposed law.
Senator Raoul.
And does House Bill 1 criminalize the use of cannabis by medical cannabis card holders in a vehicle and in public, subjecting them to arrest for illegal possession or use of cannabis and the revocation of their medical cannabis card if they do so?
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir, that's absolutely correct. That's part of the structure of the bill.
Senator Raoul.
To the bill. I'd like to commend the sponsor for bringing this bill forth and for having these very, very narrow precautions that would make this the most restrictive medical cannabis bill in the nation. As I know, as the sponsor, as a former prosecutor, has a sensitivity to this. I can think of no better sponsor to make sure that we have the precautions in the bill to make sure that this is a narrow way to give compassion and relief to those who suffer from many debilitating illnesses. I urge and I hope.
Senator Oberweis, for what you rise.
Question of the sponsor.
Indicates you will yield.
Senator, I am truly undecided at this point. I don't have a list of prepared questions to ask, but one of the objections that I keep hearing is from law enforcement agencies who are concerned that there is no good test. If somebody is pulled over, perhaps you have more information. Is there a test that will be able to determine if somebody is in fact influenced by the use of the marijuana?
Senator Hayne.
Senator Oberweis, that's an excellent question. Cannabis can be in one's bloodstream for up to a month. There can be a trace of it. And the law at the current time is that if one is stopped and there's a blood test or a urine test and they find a trace of marijuana, it's DUI. Even though they're sober as a judge because they smoked it or consumed it 20 days ago. That's the law. The reason for that is there wasn't a test really to determine a litmus test like .08. .08 has been generally accepted as enough to indicate an impaired driver with alcohol, but marijuana is not. So what we devised here was a system which required a field sobriety test, and we made it admissible for the first time in the law. And a field sobriety test shows distracted attention, the inability to do multiple tasks, such as turning the steering wheels, stepping on the gas. These are tests approved by the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, NHTSA. And what we did is, on one's driver's license, if one is a permission holder to use marijuana, it's listed. And if there's reason for the officer to stop, it could be any reason showing weaving or anything of the sort, or they run a stop sign and the officer smells marijuana, that officer can require that card holder to take that test. And if they fail, that's admissible to show impairment. That's not the law now for DUI. It's if a DUI person is stopped and if they refuse, their license is summarily suspended for, I believe it's 90 days or 6 months. Under this, it's suspended for a year, but their card is permanently revoked. This forces them to realize that they may not use this to such an extent that they're impaired. Absolutely not the case. And this is for the first time we've made this test admissible. There was some debate on this, but I believe it's necessary for the officers to know. And if they see any open cannabis, they're charged. No rights, they're charged, their card is revoked.
Senator Oberweis.
Thank you, Senator. It's a very good answer. I have one other final question. Another objection that's been raised is the cost. Would this bring in requirement to have new government employees to administer the program and supervise this? And if so, do you have an idea of what the cost might be?
Senator Hayne.
Senator, that's an excellent question, and we struggle with that. There cannot be a cost to the state with this. It has to be paid by fees. And those are going to be established by the Department of Public Health, the Department of Agriculture, and the state police, and be established by rule. We have no idea. But the user, the people who are in this system have to pay. That's correct. Be no cost.
Senator McCarter, for what purpose do you rise?
I'd like to ask some questions of the sponsor, please.
Indicates you will yield.
Senator, where is law enforcement on this? Specifically, where are the sheriffs, where are the chiefs of police?
Senator Hayne.
The Sheriff's Association, my good friends, and the chiefs of police, my good friends, are opposed to the bill.
Senator McCarter.
Specifically, why would that be?
Senator Hayne.
I really, with all due respect to them, not want to speculate for the years. And Senator McCarty, you can go back to my tenure as State's Attorney in Madison County. I believe I was well known as pro-cop, pro-State's Attorney, pro-sheriff, and they do not believe that anything good can be said about marijuana in this context. I don't agree.
Senator McCarter.
I don't think anyone questions your support of law enforcement, Senator, especially over your well-known career as a prosecutor, and we don't question that in the least. But I think they do have concerns because they spend a lot of their time dealing with this drug. In fact, out of all that's confiscated in the state of Illinois, it's over 38,000 pounds that's been seized. The majority of everything that's been seized has been cannabis. And it costs a lot of money for them to do this. Well, they do it because they do have problems with the drug. I know you disagree with them, but I think we should take their opinion very seriously. I'm going to move on to another question about production and distribution. Can you help us understand how this is going to be produced, how this is going to be harvested, assembled, packaged, and distributed? Please.
Senator Hayne.
Containers cannot be in any way open to the public. It's got to be grown in conditions under the supervision of the Department of Agriculture, where they note what comes in, what goes out. Same with the dispensaries. They have They're monitored, they're subject to search by the police 24/7. If there's any leakage, they will lose their licenses, their corporate licenses. They will be prosecuted.
Senator McCarter.
Explain to us what kind of license they will have, and will that require them to have any kind of professional requirements to be a licensed grower?
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir. They will be licensed and controlled by the state, regulated under departments with an expertise in that area. And under the general supervision of the state police.
Senator McCarter.
What kind of professional title would they have to have? Chemist, cannabis, agricultural specialist? I mean, what do you expect them to have?
Senator Hayne.
Well, Senator, I'd be speculating, but I presume a botanist would be a good one. I mean, these are people that are going to grow these, and they want them to meet certain standards. The Department of Agriculture would be one to set those. These are, the way this bill is set up, under the supervision of these skilled agencies, they can't be a fly-by-night operation.
Senator McCarter.
Is there anyone in our department currently that understands the chemistry of this drug well enough to actually regulate it?
Senator Hayne.
I don't know whether there's one now, but I'm sure they're going to find some. Mr. President, I'm sorry, I do wanted to add, I'm confident that they'll find the expertise. And I do, as to the law enforcement question, I failed to note that we had a continued colloquy with the law enforcement officials in drafting and redrafting this bill over the years. And the state police, the Fraternal Order of Police, State Lodge, and the State Attorney Association are all neutral on the bill. I wanted to note that.
Senator McCarter.
One more question regarding this professional title of these growers. You said perhaps a botanist, but are we sure that we wouldn't need for them to have some chemistry background or even a medical background, since this is a drug? Especially one that's not approved by the FDA?
Senator Hayne.
Yes, and NSTA has not specifically approved this, is because it's on this schedule of controlled substances. It's done in 1937 by Congress. A group of political folks in 1930s did it over the objection of the eight, forced everyone to stand down on any movement anywhere. And that's a real problem. The Attorney General of the United States has, in the past few years, modified the federal position on this, that if a state has a tight structure for the delivery of this, and it's targeted to those with these illnesses consistent with medical evidence, then they're not going to interfere. And I would note to you, Senator, that a couple of years ago, the National Review magazine, which was founded by William Buckley, Jr., which is arguably the house organ of the conservative movement, wrote a favorable editorial, which I have, praising the President of the United States and the Attorney General of the United States for their change in policy on medical marijuana. The National Review editor said it was a victory for common sense and for federalism. This is the conservative National Review.
Senator McCarter.
Thank you, Senator, for reminding us of that endorsement from the National Review. Honestly, I don't see where that has anything to do with this today, but I guess it's good. It sounds good, but you know, if the FDA, surely they have some of the same thoughts as you, that this would be comforting to patients in pain, and they would have pursued approving this as a drug. I mean, there's got to be a reason. Believe me, in this political climate, surely having control over every agency, as the party in charge does today, they would be able to pursue this and get this approved. Why don't they get it approved as a drug?
Senator Haney.
Senator McCarter, again, to answer that the way I did before, I think it's because it was placed by Congress on this schedule, and they're inhibited by that from moving. I mean, I'm with you. I wish they would. I wish they would look at it, allow people who suffer pain to use it.
Senator McCarter.
Let me ask another question. Now, someone sets up in this enclosed area, this greenhouse, and they've got the license. They're an approved botanist. They're not necessarily a chemist or don't have a medical degree, but they start producing according to the guidelines that you set up in the regulations under the licensing agreement. They're going to carry on business in this state. They're going to produce. They're going to buy their product to start this up. They're going to produce it. They're going to sell it. They're going to have money coming in, money going out. What's the effect on the bank? Is a bank required to accept and handle the cash of this illegal product?
Senator Hayne.
Senator, I'm going to read you from the bill. The act requires operating bylaws that include procedures for the oversight of the cultivation center, development and implementation of a plant monitoring system, medical cannabis container tracking system, accurate record keeping, staffing, a security plan reviewed by the state police that are in accordance with the rules issued by the Department of Agriculture under this act. A physical inventory shall be performed of all plants, medical cannabis containers on a weekly basis. The people employed have that experience with agricultural cultivation techniques and industry standards. They must have academic degrees, certifications, or relevant experience with related businesses. They have to show the identity of anyone having an interest, pecuniary interest in these cultivation centers. I mean, this thing is filled with one check after another on the possibility of abuse. So these are honest businesses. And it allows the cultivation of this substance which can relieve the terrible pain suffered by people. And they won't have to go to the dark side to get it. It'll be grown here in Illinois, not somewhere else.
Senator McCarter.
Senator, you mentioned something just now that just made me wonder, what are the industry standards for growing pot? What are the organizations that will put their approval on this and say, you are growing it according to the industry standard? Is it a national standard, a state standard, a world standard, and who are they?
Senator Hayne.
Senator, that will be developed by the department. That will be developed by the department according to those strict rules. And I don't know. I'm a mere lawyer.
Senator McCarter.
Senator, that, you know, we as a state can't figure out a pension program. We can't do pensions. There's so many things we can't do. But now we're going to develop the industry standards for growing pot nationwide through JCAR. Boy, whoever's on JCAR, your job just got a lot harder. And I look forward to this monumental task of developing industry standards. I think the answer, there is no industry standard. We're just going to wing it. Is that what I hear, Senator Hayne, that we're just going to try to figure this out in JCAR?
Senator Hayne.
Yeah. I have confidence in the departments. This is a pilot program. It'll take a year to construct this. These are reputable people that will be reviewed and their backgrounds checked. Banks will make lending decisions based upon that. It'll take a year to review this. If we have to have a trailer bill, we can do it. But this is a pretty complex and tight structure, which I think should, and again, your questions are reasonable. I'm just saying that we take this.
Senator McCarter.
Senator Hayne, I appreciate you trying really hard. I just don't have as much faith in JCAR, with all due respect to every member, to develop industry standards for growing pot. I just don't have that in. Let me ask another question. How will this, what about advertising? Can you advertise for this? Where? In print, in TV, in radio? How can you advertise?
Senator Hayne.
No, there can be no advertisements. This is a physician-based system.
Carter.
How will the growers and the distributors let people know that their product is for sale?
Senator Hayne.
They have to go through the Department of Public Health.
Heard their bill?
Almost. 2 questions and I'll close. I appreciate your patience. How much can be prescribed, Senator?
Senator Hayne.
It's no more than
Senator McCarter.
Within how many days?
Senator Hayne.
14 days.
Senator McCarter.
You know, ounces don't mean much unless I guess you're in the business. I'm not. I don't suspect that any of us are, but what's that equivalent to is 180 joints. That's about 13 joints a day. So everybody should take note of that. Now, we don't all have to confess whether we did or we didn't inhale or whatever, but I think we all understand what 13 joints means in a day's time. I'll close with the issue of marijuana as a gateway drug. And let me just say that studies have shown that people who use marijuana also tend to use other illegal drugs. And there's evidence that among multi-drug users, marijuana is the drug that was most commonly used first. Study in 2006 states risk of using other illicit drugs are becoming dependent upon other illicit drugs and using a wider variety of illicit drugs. You know, today you say we're only talking about medical marijuana and it's contained in a quasi-approved bottle, like all the other drugs that we know are safe and approved by the FDA, like Tylenol, like acetaminophen, all these basic drugs that we trust are safe. But we're making a decision today to say in our communities that marijuana use is okay. It's accepted, and we're doing this based on concern, genuine concern, that I know the sponsor has for people that are in pain. I know that. I believe that. But let me just tell you this. Ultimately, we will choose what the future of our community is. For every touching story we have heard about the benefits to those in pain, I remind you today that there are 1,000 times more parents who will need from the pain of losing a child. The very illegal, FDA unapproved, addiction-forming drug that you are asking us now to make a normal part of our communities. As one of those dads, I ask you to vote no.
Senator Barrickman.
Mr. President, question to the sponsor.
Nick Casey will yield.
Senator, I have concerns about this legislation that I'd like to discuss with you. But before I do so, let me say first that I commend the work that you have done on this legislation. I think that it is very apparent that you have put in a lot of hard work here to try to craft legislation that you believe will not make Illinois look like many of those other states who have gone down this path already. I also know that there are many people whom are watching what happens in Illinois, many of our residents, watching this debate and believing that if this legislation becomes law, they will be able to find a mechanism for which they can find relief from a terrible illness that they may face, or family or loved ones may face. And that notion, I believe, tugs at every person in this building. And the notion that our government may restrain their abilities to find relief is compelling. But my question to you, and the issue I think that's before us here today, is why is this discussion happening here? You stated that in 1937, an act of Congress prohibited the use of cannabis by federal law. You said there's been a change in policy. I think the President has issued, or the Attorney General has issued a change in policy. Explain to me how the state of Illinois has the authority to act here given those circumstances.
Senator Hayne.
Senator, that's a good question, and and that's one reason why I cited the National Review article, because it is from an ethic that has an emphasis on federalism, the 10th Amendment, and that's the relevance of that. The reason why, as I stated a few moments ago, we haven't moved in more substantive research is because of the political act with a small p by Congress in 1937 to put this on the schedule without doing what we're doing here. In fact, the AMA, I have the Council on Science and Public Health of the AMA, in this section, which I forgot to read earlier, stated, and 2 years ago, they urged that marijuana status as a federal Schedule I controlled substance be reviewed with the goal of facilitating the conduct of clinical precisely. And this should not be viewed as an endorsement, to be honest, for a state-based medical cannabis program. They're not saying that, but they're saying that the scientific evidence on the therapeutic use of cannabis should meet current standards and studied, because there is evidence coming from their own members, anecdotal evidence. The Institute of Medical Professor at Washington U, many of us have anecdotal stories of the use of marijuana to alleviate pain. And everyone is on hold because of Congress in 1937. And marijuana has become part of this whole, I guess it's a panoply of drugs. And I certainly, my heart goes out to Senator McCarter and his concerns. But I have seen the effects of illegal drug use in my as I've been on raids showing people frankly living in pigsty with children and consuming heroin and consuming alpine methamphetamines, a recent phenomenon. And how they got into it, I don't know. We established the drug court to pull them out. But cannabis is clearly the most, it's benign compared to OxyContin and Vicodin. Which is abused. You'll find that in every one of these crack houses. The patient says, I can't take this. I can't go on with it. The doc says, try some marijuana. So, to me, as an officer of the court and an former officer of the law, the hallmark of the law should be reasonableness. It should meet the constitutional test. And it shouldn't, as you imply, to open the floodgates, or as Senator McCarter to apply, for general abuse and use. That's not my intent. That's why it's a pilot program. We're going to see how this thing works. And if it goes off the track, I've got a 4-year term, God willing. I'll be here to pull the plug. I mean, this is a pilot program to set it up. We build this thing with check after check, as I pointed out. But that's the reason why the states have gone ahead, because Congress mobilized this political act in 1937. And no one, politically, no one wants to say, God, we can eat drug laws.
To your point, Senator, Congress has acted. The 10th Amendment is what it is. There may be many, many people who disagree with many acts of Congress. But until Congress changes their tune, laws that have been in place since the 1800s or earlier remain in place until Congress acts again. And in this instance, Congress acted then. The 10th Amendment reserves, as you so accurately depicted, the 10th Amendment reserves to the states the rights not afforded them, or not, for which the federal government has not acted. But in this instance, the federal government has acted. Is it your belief that because the president has issued an order here that somehow that 1937 act is no longer pertinent?
Senator Hayne.
That's another good question. I think the discretion of the Attorney General is to act in the case where a state has set this thing up as a pure medical program. And if it's loose and it's just a sham to have legalized to intervene. But if it's not, if we do this the way, I'm confident, based upon these statements, that they're not.
Senator Bergman.
My understanding is this is a 4-year pilot program. The president's term is up within those 4 years. What happens if the next president of the United States issues a new order?
Senator Hayne.
Senator, we have to make sure we elect a Democrat. Just kidding. I don't want to lose your vote.
Senator Bergman.
To the bill, have clearly done a lot of work on this legislation. My concern here is that this is a debate for which needs to occur in Washington, D.C. If there are individuals in this building, in this state, who believe that the federal government has it wrong, there is a well-established process for that to change. Some people are saying the federal government on this issue isn't moving fast enough. Fair enough, I can make that argument on a whole number of things that the federal government is doing. The bottom line here is we have an established framework for how we make decisions in this country. There are certain decisions allowed for the federal government, those for the state, others for the locals. This issue clearly is an issue for our federal government to deal with. The government has spoken on it. Process for the people to speak. They can call their congressman, you can get involved in elections and help elect the next president, but also the next Congress. What concerns me is the step that this legislation takes into an arena for which the state of Illinois should not be in. There there, they can stop by Walgreens with their prescription from their doctor and pick up those drugs that are approved by the FDA for their use. This legislation does nothing more than to hand one drug, and in doing so sidesteps an already established federal bureaucracy. It sidesteps federal law, and it takes us down a path for which none of us can predict what the next step may be. What drug is next? You're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. Those are issues for the doctors and for the FDA to establish. I think this legislation is wrong for the state of Illinois, and I urge a no vote.
Senator Severson, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Question of the sponsor.
Indicates you will yield.
Senator, mine will be much briefer. I just want to address a couple questions regarding questions I received from the Illinois Rental Property Owners Association regarding guidelines of if there is if a landholder says no to smoking, or it's a smoke-free premise, what are the requirements that are in this legislation?
Senator Hayne.
Thank you, Senator Severson. The property owner rules, if they have a drug-free, smoke-free house, that must be the case.
Senator Severson.
So even if they have a prescription for this, if the landlord says the rules are this is a smoke-free, then that supersedes that concern.
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Senator Severson.
And then regarding concerns raised in regarding the municipal crime-free drug housing ordinances, if the local government has those ordinances in place and a individual has marijuana in their apartment, the government apartment, then does this address that coverage?
Senator.
How this would come into?
Senator Hayne.
Senator, my intent is that they remain drug-free. It's the primacy of the local government managing whatever apartment it is. Same as a landlord, drug-free, smoke-free, what I consider to be.
Severson.
Okay. So it's the same case when you have a subsidized housing, that those rules in those subsidized housing, even though they're government housing as opposed to a private landlord's no smoking rules, in a government housing scenario, that decision can also be made as a drug-free, even though this individual may have a script.
Senator Hayne.
Sir, yes, sir, that's my intent.
Senator Severson.
Thank you very much. That's the question I have. Appreciate it.
Senator LaHood, for what purpose do you rise?
Question of
the sponsor.
indicates he will yield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Hayne, I have a great deal of respect for you when it comes to prosecutorial matters in your experience as a prosecutor and with law enforcement. And in listening to the debate, as I understand it, there is nobody in law enforcement that is supportive of this bill. Is that correct?
Senator Hayne.
I don't know that that's the case. I mean, there may be some officers, sheriffs that like it. I have no idea. I know that the organizations either are neutral or opposed, as I've listed.
Senator LaHood.
And just so I'm clear, the Illinois State Police is not supportive. The DEA is not supportive. That is a law enforcement group.
Senator Hayne.
Senator, I agree. They're either not supportive, neutral, or they're against it. That is correct.
Senator LaHood.
I guess just to summarize that, so you don't have anybody that is supportive of it, is that correct?
Senator Hayne again.
Senator LaHood, I repeat and re-allege, either they're not for it or they're against it.
Senator LaHood.
Thank you. And in looking at the material on this issue, Senator Hayne, the one thing that I guess I've focused, looking at what this, from a public policy standpoint, will do for our young people, for teenagers and adolescents, and what this says about marijuana and the illegality of marijuana. And I've looked at 3 different studies that show that states with medical marijuana laws have far higher rates of teenage marijuana use. I guess what would be your response to that?
Senator Hayne.
I don't know of these studies, Senator, but we have now in society an effort, series of efforts, to teach children responsibility in the use of prescription drugs and a number of other things. Alcohol is reserved for adults, and that's made clear over and over to children. OxyContin is a prescription drug that shouldn't be abused by children. We've made it, if this is adopted, it'll be the same effort. This is not a children's item. It's an adult matter. And we make that clear over and over. Did the legalization of alcohol in 1933 increase teenage drinking? Perhaps. I don't know. But we've made it clear over and over. Marijuana, in fact, I believe that adopting this would clearly show young people that this is a serious matter for adults. It's only used for medical purposes and should never be used for recreational use or any other purpose.
Senator LaHood.
And Senator Hayne, I appreciate that response, and that may be your view, but that directly contradicts the studies I just mentioned to you and the fact that states that have medical marijuana laws, teenage marijuana use has significantly gone up. And I guess my question is, that education process you talked about and parental guidance and all of those things, the other part of that, Senator Hayne, and I think you fully understand this, you know, as a prosecutor, I spent 9 years as a state and federal prosecutor, and when you look at drug cases, particular cases of teenagers and career criminals, when you look at probation reports, it always starts with marijuana and leads to more addictive drugs, whether it's cocaine or heroin or methamphetamine. always starts with marijuana. And I have not said disproves in the fact that it's a gateway drug or drugs. And when I look at these statistics in other states and the direct correlation of medical marijuana laws and teenage drug use going up, the statistics don't bear out what you're saying, and that, to me, causes concern.
Senator Hayne.
Quite simply, in 11 of the first 15 states that adopted medical marijuana, teenage use actually went down, according to our information. The Institute of Medicine in 1999 states there is no evidence, this is Cater, predictor of serial abuse. I mean, so that's, if you want to rely on those studies, that's fine. But I also want to emphasize again this thing about law enforcement. The Chiefs of Police Association, the Sheriff's Association are against the bill. However, the other ones are neutral on the bill.
Senator LaHood.
Senator Hayne, thank you for that. And I'd be happy to share these studies with you. Specifically, this is the conclusion of the SAMHSA study that was done in 2010. One reason teenagers smoke more pot in states with medical marijuana laws is that they begin to see pot as a benign medication, word that you used previously. And I write on that. People are, this type of law and laws in these other states, they give the justification, the rationale, the normalization that this is somehow benign. That's the problem. And the problem in this particular case, and I can't get over that fact in these studies and what that's done to teenagers in these other states. And I think we all recognize teenagers, and that bears out in the criminal justice system.
Senator Hayne, I think there was a question there.
I don't agree. OxyContin is clearly more millions of medicine cabinets as we speak with no control.
Senator LaHood.
In 10 of the states, this was a study done in 2008, 20% more teenagers were smoking pot. In medical marijuana states, 2011 went up to 30%, most prevalent. The research shows that pot frequently have difficulty with memory, attention, and problem solving, find it harder to learn, get lower grades, and are less likely to finish high school or college. And again, we look at what this does in terms of legitimizing that. You know, I have not seen anything from law enforcement or any study that deters me away from that fact. And I have a gentleman who heads up the Peoria Multi-County Narcotics Enforcement Group. He's our director, Renee Sandoval in Peoria, and he heads up our drug unit there. He's a former state trooper for a number of years involved with drugs. And he said, quote, law enforcement officers are 110% opposed to medical marijuana legislation. Quote, as to the dangers of drugs and drug abuse. This right here sends a totally different message. I urge a no vote on this legislation.
Senator Delgado, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the sponsor yield?
Indicates he will.
First of all, I want to congratulate Senator Hayne for taking on such a difficult chore, especially with his background. It really gives me a lot of relief. Also coming from the background of law enforcement, and I just have a couple questions. Mr. Hayne, Senator Hayne, are you familiar that what we're talking about here is medical marijuana in terms of creating a prescription to adults that need it for possibly osteoporosis with this legislation?
Senator Hayne.
Yes, sir. The conditions listed in the bill.
Senator Delgado.
Would it also be true that medical marijuana will come in many forms? It could come in liquid, it could come in lozenges. Would you agree that it comes in all other way?
Yes, sir. Failed to mention at the beginning, it can be consumed in a cookie or a brownie.
Senator Delgado.
Senator Hayne, are you familiar with a program in Michigan, the state of Michigan, that also has authority to dispense and or other neighboring states that do so through liquid form in a soda, in a cookie for adult of Illinois?
Senator Hayne.
No, sir, I'm not.
Senator Delgado.
To the bill, Mr. President, I rise in strong support. Ladies and gentlemen of the General Assembly, we got to get our minds off the corner. We got to get our mind off of cannabis and marijuana. There is indica and there's sativa. So sativa, cannabis, sativa. Indica is the most prominent drug or marijuana strain that is grown for medical marijuana. It is, matter of fact, GW Pharmaceuticals has a trial going on in Washington, D.C. If anyone should be held accountable for the amount of drugs that are killing our young people and adults through this nation, should be the FDA. Because they're the ones that are letting out OxyContin with 800 milligrams of acetaminophen. They're the ones that let out Vicodin, which is hydrocodone, with 800 milligrams of acetaminophen, the common denominator, that are killing more than, actually it's second to gunshot wounds by death in America is by opiates. Second now, according to the CDC, look it up on your Google. Center for Disease Control, and ask, what is the #2 killer next to automobile deaths, accidents in cars? Opiates, specifically Xanax, hydrocodone, which is Vicodin, which is OxyContin, which is found in every medical home, every home. And children see that as a benign prescription as they see mom and dad do it. So at the end of the day, we're talking about a plant that actually comes in 2 strains. And when I used to bust marijuana, I thought it was marijuana. But a defense attorney can come and argue this is indica marijuana and wind up reducing it in terms of its strains and what it can create and what it can be. The major force that Mr. Hayne is talking about is called a cannabinoid. And we can let the scientists talk about that. This is a little too deep for this General Assembly. This is about patients that are suffering with osteoporosis. This is about individuals that are having a difficult time finding solutions to their cancer pains, that are finding other solutions and are going to the black market buying it anyway. We must find these solutions, and in the strains of what Senator Haynes is proposing here is not only rational, but is also the wave and where things are going in terms of being able to control some of the things we're trying to do. I would hope that we're going to have such a spirited debate when I bring legislation. We're talking about marijuana. Marijuana. When I had a hearing down at Southern Illinois University, 400 people attended. No one talked about overdosing on marijuana. They said my son fell asleep and when he woke up he was starving. Because he had smoked herb, he smoked a joint. But when they take Vicodin, when they take Xanax, when they take the drugs that are coming out of the FDA, those are the criminals that are sending it out. Where is the outrage? Where's the outcry on that? How many of us have to lose our children to the drugs that we get prescriptions by same doctors that say, smoke a joint. I don't have anything that I can give you that's going to relieve the anxieties that you hold today. That may not only be physical, but maybe psychological and only within you. You're going to have to make that decision and let them make it. And let's take a look. We're dads. Let's sit down in that kitchen old discussion. It's about time. Marijuana? Vote aye.
Senator, for what purpose do you rise?
To the bill, Mr. President.
To the bill.
I stand in very strong opposition to this bill. And the reason why I do that is for a number of reasons. I think that I have the strongest background than any one of you all in here. I am a certified alcohol and drug counselor. I went to school and I studied it. I have a master's degree that I've had since 1982. I run programs. I run outpatient, intensive outpatient, residential. I run methadone clinics. I run alcohol clinics and drug. That includes marijuana, cocaine, crack cocaine, as well as heroin. You know? And all of this rhetoric that I keep hearing all day is ridiculous. You all know full well the effects marijuana has on the body. All they did was put medical in front of marijuana. It's still a drug. I know that people who are ill, I have family members in my family who has medical issues and they're in pain. But in 1985, DA approved the synthetic THC. THC is a chemical inside of marijuana that gives you that euphoric high feeling. The FDA approved a synthetic drug called Marinol, M-A-R-I-N-O-L, that relieves the nausea associated with cancer chemotherapy. What we're doing is responding to the public outcry. Why don't we take a look at the science? This matter has been searched. It has been debated for a very long time. Between this so-called medical marijuana and Marinol, Marinol does not have the THC in it. It'll solve the medical problems, but it will not get people high. It will not get them high. We're talking about passing concealed carry and marijuana, so now we're talking about drugs and guns. Law enforcement has already stated that they can't even handle, they cannot handle the crime and other issues that we're creating by passing this bill today. So I'm going to vote no, because I'm not going to have this matter on my hands. It's going to be you all. And I would ask that every single one of you all vote no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Holmes, for what purpose do you rise? Excuse me, first. Ray Preston of KMOV TV requests permission of video. Seeing no opposition, permission is granted. Senator Holmes.
To the bill.
To the bill.
First of all, I want to start out by saying, as you all know, we passed this bill in this chamber a couple of years ago, and I want to thank the sponsor for bringing back this bill, which is much stricter than the bill we passed in this chamber, and I also want to thank the House for finally passing a medical marijuana bill and helping out so many people in this state that are in desperate need of a drug that will relieve some of the symptoms they suffer because of so many different illnesses. I don't think there's anybody in this chamber who's not aware of the fact that I have MS. Who are able to get that, although I'm fortunate not to need it, medical marijuana is on that list. And I will tell you all, the people who have approached me that have MS, who have talked about the importance of passing this bill. The reason being is that it relieves some of the horrible, debilitating symptoms of MS. It relieves the spasticity, it relieves the pain, and it relieves some of the fatigue. There's actually been studies that say it may even slow the neurodegeneration that's associated with MS. Pain relief is probably the most well-known benefit of medical marijuana. And pain relief have endorsed the use of medical marijuana for the treatment of severe and chronic pain. We're talking about people who suffer from rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia. Medical marijuana's full potential has also been seen when it comes to respect to cancer treatment. And it hasn't all been realized. In a recent study, medical marijuana was found to actually halt the spread of breast cancer. It's been found to inhibit tumor growth. In addition, we know it relieves some of the symptoms from chemotherapy that's used to treat cancer, the vomiting, the nausea, and as a huge plus, it can stimulate appetite, which will help these patients who are unable to eat and are losing weight. And if you have ever watched a friend or a loved one with cancer, and you have watched them lose 50% of their body weight because they are so nauseous they can't eat, you cannot tell me that you would not do anything in your power to help them find something that can stimulate that appetite and have them able to eat, to get them through the treatment so they can finally beat the cancer. The current legal restrictions with the use of marijuana are actually preventing researchers from conducting the clinical trials that are necessary. I would say if we really want to eliminate any drug abuse, and we know that it's actually reached epidemic proportions in this country, the abuse of prescription drugs, then I think what we need to do is pull all the prescription drugs off the market. That will certainly reduce the abuse of legal prescription drugs. That doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense? Because we want to take care of people. Because we're compassionate. We don't want them to suffer the illnesses and the debilitation that they suffer from their diseases. So, we embrace the use of drugs. Let's talk about some of those that we use. Go into your medicine cabinet and you have the Vicodin for the last root canal you had. That drug, by the way, is more highly addictive than marijuana. How about the Valium, those anxiety attacks? Talk about two very, very highly addictive drugs. Because these drugs that I'm talking about are on the list of the 9 most addictive prescription drugs. So, how about that Ritalin you give your child with ADD? By the way, who's worried about being a little type? OxyContin, by the way, which is a pain-killing drug, which is also the most important benefit of medical marijuana, which is for pain. This is the prescription drug that is likened to be most like your street drug heroin. And this is prescribed about 6 million times a year. And it's in fact been called the gateway to heroin use. I think that is a much more dangerous drug than the medical marijuana we're talking about. The medical marijuana will help the 35-year-old mother with MS be able to walk her child to the end of the block to catch the bus, rather than being confined to her bed because of spasticity. It will help your father who's laying in bed with lung cancer, able to withstand the treatment and the chemo that may buy him some more time. So if we don't look at the compassionate effect of medical marijuana and say, yes, it's finally passed in the House, this much more restrictive bill. This will ensure quality of life for people in Illinois who so desperately need it. I urge and I vote.
Senator Hayne to close.
Mr. President, and ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I thank each and every one of you, pro and con. On for the questions and the comments that you made. This sub-high, quote unquote. We are a mature state, a mature society, and we are awash use of prescription drugs, powerful drugs, as was cited by the previous speaker. And we are embarking here upon a way to achieve relief, compassionate relief, consistent with the law, a system which avoids abuse. This bill is the tightest, most controlled legislative initiative in the United States related to medical cannabis. It allows a finite group of people with severe illnesses to get medication to address their serious health conditions, generally chronic. Many of these people are dying. They're dying. And it does so with a drill, allows relief to the suffering without causing physical addiction, side effect suffering, and provides hope for the most vulnerable people in our society. Those suffering through no fault of their own from severe medical illnesses. This bill will advance the common good of society. It will take four years to construct and to implement. Any representation I have made on this floor of this great chamber will be put to the test, and I will be held accountable, and I will do what I can to rectify any problems. I would respect.
The question is, shall House Bill 1 pass? All those in favor vote aye, opposed nay. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Take the record on that question. There's 35 ayes, 21 nays, 0 voting present. House Bill 1, having received the required constitutional majority, is declared passed.